Yes, he was expelled. I mean, he is Britain's most famous, remarkable producer.
As my health got more and more complex, this issue became personal for me. Because the proponents, you know, they say, and that's why I tell my mom's story all the time, because the proponents say, no, this is only for people who have 6 months or less to live.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Israeli paper Haaretz note that these two politicians voted against giving Israel another $1 billion for its Iron Dome defense system. But only one gets the hate mail. I'll let you guess which one. Now, Israel's an apartheid state, and apartheid is an international crime. Therefore, it should not be getting or buying any weapons from the international community. But let's put that principle aside today. Israel wants $1 billion for missiles that it used against Palestinians in May. But Israel already received $3.8 billion from the United States for its defense needs, including whatever it wanted to throw against Palestinians this year. How do they have the gall to ask for more? And Israel's a rich country. If it wants more weapons to use against Palestinians, why don't Israelis raise their own taxes instead of ours? Just saying. Yesterday, I saw former U.S. Afghan War Commander Stanley McChrystal on TV peddling a new book. Why would we want to hear about anything he has to say? He and his fellow experts failed us for decades. Military and CIA practices of using overwhelming force and hideous torture turned out not only to be disgusting, but ineffective. But so far, none of the brass has been called on the carpet or even demoted. There is talk in the media about Afghanistan, but only very narrowly. Offense and defense, about whether it was a good idea to pull out the last 2,500 troops. The argument is made that these troops were not being killed in recent years, and they could have stayed there indefinitely, and so could the friendly Afghan government. Nonsense. The only reason U.S. troops weren't attacked is because Trump made a deal with the Taliban, told them we were leaving, and even signed a document that we were going to leave by May 1st. You recall the history books telling us that in the 1600s, the proper people of New England hunted for witches? Well, something similar is going on in Britain, inside the Labour Party. Many people have been expelled from the party, not for being actual witches, but for supposedly being anti-Semites, or for being at an event with one of the alleged anti-Semites, or for questioning official Labour Party reports on the subject. It all has a lot to do with Israel. No surprise there. I spoke about it this week with British activist Tony Greenstein. He's a longtime activist in Britain, a writer of an essential blog, the first person expelled from the Labour Party during what he calls the fake anti-Semitism campaign.
The first Jewish person expelled.
There was one who was non-Jewish?
I'm not sure. But I claim the credit of being the first Jewish person.
So we're going to talk about that whole business.
Yeah.
And, for years, the mainstream papers in the U.S. have talked about this anti-Semitism problem in the Labor Party, the Israeli papers, even the liberal Haaretz has been concentrating on this. And there's been a lot of expulsions in the Labor Party for anti-Semitism. So we're going to talk to you about this. So in your blog, and let me screen share here and show the latest entry. I hope I'm going to do it right. So
yes.
It's in view, and you see Tony Greenstein's blog, and that's the best way to get to it. Just Google that title; it'll come right up. And he's talking about a particular member of Parliament giving an apology and a not apology. So let me get rid of the screen share. And all right, so what is that about? Let's get specific.
It's about a member, my local MP, a member of the campaign group, the Socialist campaign group of MPs, who unfortunately are in need of a backbone transplant, a spine transplant. The problem is we can't get it on the National Health Service, so they're crippled in a sense. So once a year at Labour Party conference, they have a rally where they make fine fighting speeches, and almost immediately they row back from it, of course. And Lloyd Russell Moyle is a prime example. He talks about the god-awful leadership of the Labour Party. He apologises to all of those who are victims of the purge. And then almost in the next breath, the next day, he says, but of course, lots of anti-Semites were expelled, because he doesn't want to be seen as what they call an anti-Semitism denier. This is a crime. Unfortunately, Jeremy Corbyn adopted it. That if you deny anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, you're part of the problem.
Let me ask you a geography question. Where are you? Are you in London or?
I'm in Brighton.
Brighton. So that's the beach, right?
It is, yes. We're the south on the English Channel.
Okay.
And I'm in Brighton, Kent Town, which is famous for being the gay capital of Britain.
Uh-huh. All right, so let's get into this issue. So the establishment says there's all this anti-Semitism in the Labor Party, and there's been a whole bunch of expulsions. Now, you were the first Jew expelled, maybe the first person expelled during this campaign. Who were some of the others? Well,
today there are lots of Jewish people. The latest one is the co-chair of Jewish Voice for Labour, Leah Levine. She participated in a rally outside the conference against the witch hunt. And she went into the conference and was stopped by security and escorted out by the police and others. So she's also the latest victim. But there are many, or they've got notice of auto-exclusion, as it's called. Because if you associate with prescribed organisations, and I set up one of them, Labour Against the Witch Hunt and Labour in Exile Network, then you're automatically excluded. But not only if you associate them from the date of prescription, they've backdated it so that any association, however far back, is now an offence. It's quite amazing. It's contrary to all the norms of jurisprudence and natural justice that what was not an offence at the time has now been retrospectively made into an offence. This is justice, and Sir Keir Starmer, who is a notable Queen's Counsel, a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, no less. So yes, the witch hunt is in full flow. Senator Joe would be proud of him.
You mean Joe McCarthy in our country?
Yes.
I mean, it's odd. No one gets expelled from any of the parties in the United States, as far as I know.
But you can't be a member of the Democrats. Don't have a membership, do they?
No, not really. I mean, you could register as a Democrat that lets you vote in primaries. That's about it. Green Party, I think, has membership, but that's
but the two main bourgeois parties, I don't think, have memberships, because you have a facade of democracy in essence, really, don't you? I mean, it's not a genuine participatory democracy in any real sense.
But I want to get back to the expulsions. The famous filmmaker, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Is it Loach? Ken Loach?
Yeah.
Okay, he was expelled, right?
Yes, well, he was auto-excluded. He was held to have expelled himself by virtue of being a patron of Labour Against the Witch Hunt.
Uh-huh.
Yes, he was expelled. I mean, he is Britain's most famous, remarkable producers. Won 2 Palme d'Or awards. He's been on the scene for nearly half a century. But I mean, producing films about social justice and speaking up about the various iniquities of capitalism is now really an expulsion offence in the Labour Party.
Now, Ken Livingstone, who was the mayor of London, he was suspended, but he didn't get expelled, right? He quit.
He quit. He was forced out. He would have been expelled.
Mm-hmm.
So he just ran. He just jumped ship.
And then there's Jeremy Corbyn, who was the leader of the Labour Party, who helped create a huge number of new members of the Labour Party. What is his status at the moment?
Well, he's a member of the Labour Party, but he's had the whip withdrawn from being a member of the Labour group in Parliament. So he exists in a kind of purgatory, in a sense. And he is and he isn't. Quite remarkable, of course. The current leader has virtually expelled from the Parliamentary Labour Party the previous leader. I mean, it's unheard of, but Corbyn is, the devil incarnate to the right.
How many people, all told, have been expelled?
Thousands, but we don't know the numbers.
Thousands.
I should imagine so. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And who
They're
has
handing them out like confetti.
Who has this power to do such a thing?
Oh, David Evans and Keir Starmer. David Evans is his pliant general secretary. He's actually the eminent Grease of the Labour Party. He's a nasty Blairite who really doesn't believe in having a membership. He would just rather have a leadership without the membership. So he wants a small party which is manageable, controllable, and answerable to the call of capital as and when it calls. I mean, he's a thoroughly reprehensible character.
All right, let me ask you to play devil's advocate for a moment. So what is the case that they claim, the establishment, has been making to say that there's this big anti-Semitism problem in the Labour Party?
Well, it's a very good question, and I'm not sure I can provide an answer insofar as nothing is logical or coherent. In essence, what they've done is redefine Jewish identity as a Zionist identity. So being Jewish is support for Israel. So if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic.
More of the interview next week, including Greenstein's take on the surprising Labour Party resolution on Palestine. Now, part of a presentation from a group opposed to something that at first hearing sounds humane, but as they explain it, is not humane at all. The group is called Progressives Against Medical-Assisted Suicide. Their event was in New Haven.
The featured speakers are Anita Cameron, Director for Minority Outreach at Not Dead Yet, a national grassroots disability rights organization that opposes legalization of assisted suicide and euthanasia, and Dr. Andre N. Sofer, Professor of Medicine at the Yale University School of Medicine. Progressives Against Medical Assisted Suicide is composed of peace, justice, and disability rights activists, advocates for single-payer health care, and supporters of women's reproductive rights.
Activist and singer Elaine Kolb introduced Anita Cameron.
For many of us, the issue we are discussing today is profoundly personal and, in terms of political and social realities, absolutely terrifying. Speaking from my heart and soul, it is such a joyful thing, an honor and privilege to be introducing my dear, dear friend, comrade, in the trenches together, been arrested together many, many times, Anita Cameron.
We skip ahead where she gets into the question of what to do when the doctor says there's no hope and the diagnosis is terminal.
Back in 2009, I'm living here in New York, in Rochester. My mom is out west in Washington State. Washington State had just enacted its assisted suicide laws. And I got a call from a frantic doctor saying, if you want to see your mother alive, you better get to Washington State in 2 days. She's just that sick. My mom was born with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and the doctor said that she was at the end stages of it. So, of course, me loving my mom the way I do, I hopped on the next thing smoking out of Rochester and got myself to Seattle, Washington. And my mom rallied, because I called her up and said, I hear you're sick. Mom, you want some company? And she was like, yeah. So, she rallied, and I stayed, for a few days. But she was sick, and they did put her in hospice. And they put her, on all these meds, and the doctor said, hey, her body's beginning the process of dying. My mom was the first person I had ever known in life to be in hospice for 6 months. Usually, when they said hospice, it was a matter of days or hours. And here, my mom, she graduated hospice. But her doctor had still convinced her that she was dying, that her body is beginning the process of dying. That was a mantra we heard over and over. And so after my mom got out of hospice, she was convinced that she was dying, so we made the arrangements. I from New York and, on her end to go to Colorado. Colorado was her home. And she wanted to go back to Colorado to die. So we made the arrangements, and we got her an apartment and got her attendants, nurses, home health care, and moved my mom into her apartment. And she went waiting to die. 6 weeks later, my mom hadn't yet died, of course. And then we were in Washington, D.C. with ADAPT. And there my mom was, on her bucket list. It was on her bucket list to go on the National Adapt Action. Okay? So she had wanted to do some things before she died. And she had been on local actions with me and gotten arrested with me. But she figured before I die, I want to go on one of these adapt things. And so she was in Washington, D.C. getting arrested. Fighting for disability justice. I mean, oh my goodness. Yeah. And so months passed, years passed. My mom did not die. And after a while, she just got to the point where, she's like, I'm too ornery to die. I'm gonna go on and do my thing. So she became active in her community. As much as I could, I'd get to Colorado and see her and chill with her, and everything. And she wound up going on another National Adapt Action and getting arrested. And we had my mom for almost 12 years. She passed away on February the 1st of 2021.
She went on to talk about similar stories. Now, most of the time, doctors are correct when they give a terminal diagnosis. So why not allow assisted suicide when the pain is just too much to bear? Cameron gives this answer.
As my health got more and more complex, this issue became personal for me. Because the proponents, they say, and that's why I tell my mom's story all the time, because the proponents say, no, this is only for people who have 6 months or less to live. If my mom, as I said, Washington State had just enacted their assisted suicide law. My mom was deemed to be terminal. All she had to do was ask. And they would have given her the medication because she was deemed to be terminal. And what's even more scary for me is that my mom and I are close and we loved each other very much. And I've seen my mom go through some terrible health issues. And she trusted me, and all I would have had to have done was to say, Mom, it's okay. Why don't you, take this. And she would have done it. See, the thing about it is that, these assisted suicide laws are horrific anyway, and they set it up so you don't really have to do any studies or reports or anything. But Oregon, which is the state that's been doing this 23 years, so it's the longest state, they put out a study of why people ask for assisted suicide. And they put out the study periodically, and they had one in 2018. They just did one, released one a couple of months back. And the top 5 reasons people ask for assisted suicide, the number 1 is a loss of autonomy. These are people who had been either deemed terminal, or they're afraid they're going to be terminal, or whatever. And so it's a loss of autonomy for them because of their condition. Feelings of being a burden, a financial, emotional, physical burden. The loss of the ability to do things that you enjoyed, the loss of the ability to do that. The loss of control of bodily functions, such as incontinence, vomiting, and feelings that they're going to be a financial burden on their family. Pain doesn't even come in the top 5. It's down to 6 or 7, and as a matter of fact, they in 2018, they kind of changed the rules a bit, and they said pain or the fear of. And that only brought it up to number 6. So what people are afraid of, why they want the suicide drugs, are all reasons having to do with disability. Existential fears related to disability that can be dealt with by, having services and supports.
That's all the time we have for this issue today. We'll continue next week, but you don't have to wait. You can see the entire program in 2 parts up at YouTube. Just search for us at Struggle Video Media. Save the date. A rally and march around the state capitol in Hartford. Now for a program of people helping people. It's called FridgeHaven. So we're here at the opening of FridgeHaven. Can you tell us about this project?
Absolutely. So FridgeHaven is a community fridge. We're open 24/7, 365. And the idea is people come and leave food. If you have extra groceries, if you have, a little extra money and you want to come and leave some food, and people can take what they need as they need it. There are no bars and there's free access. So come take what you need and leave what you can.
What's the address?
The address is Varick Memorial Church. It's 242 Dixwell Ave in New Haven.
And who organized this project?
A lot of us. This isn't the first of its kind, but it is the first here in New Haven. The first one that we put together as a part of the pandemic, but also through mutual aid efforts, was in Bridgeport. That one's called Bridgeport. But good ideas particularly spread like fire, and so here's another one popping up. There's going to be more popping up throughout Connecticut to start addressing significant food insecurity that's in a lot of our cities, in a lot of our towns, in specific neighborhoods, so keep an eye out.
Now, I know some people will say, well, it's open 24 hours a day. People just take everything or wreck it. What's been the experience in some of these other places?
So this isn't the first time that we've done an operation like this. Bridgeport has been a monumentous success because of the efforts of the people who are working at the church, like volunteers. So far, we haven't had anyone come and take all the food. People come and leave as they need.
And vandalism? Has that been a problem?
Only decorations. There have been no vandalism. There's been nothing that we have felt poorly about, nothing that's actually hindered any of the logistics or the process at all.
And it's just maintained informally, or do you have a schedule? Do people, the staff,
as long as it gets done, we plan for it, we meet around it, we are a mutual aid network, and so it's entirely interdependent. Yeah, it works.
It does. It works. And you know what? Like if something needs doing, if the fridge hasn't been sanitized all day or something, it's very easy to ask either on social media or within our networks, can somebody go and clean? And honestly, for the most part though, like you don't even have to ask. People notice the need and they fill it. And that's the wonderful thing about community.
If you build it, they'll come.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, let's get that address again.
It's 242 Dixwell Ave in New Haven. It's in the parking lot. It's the big green shed.
Of the Varick Church.
Yes, Varick Memorial Church.
And what's a cross street or cross streets? Oh,
big lot, big lot. Can't miss it.
It's a very large parking lot.
There's a big sign that says FridgeHaven. You won't miss it.
Okay, great. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.